On a sun-drenched morning in New York City, Jack Sullivan sat on a weathered park bench, his calloused hands resting on knees that had seen better days. The park bustled with life, tourists snapping photos, joggers weaving through the crowds, and street vendors hawking their wares. Yet Jack felt invisible, a ghost in a sea of vibrant life. His eyes, which had once scanned distant horizons for threats, now watched families laugh and play without truly seeing them. The sounds of car horns and bicycle bells replaced the echoes of gunfire and explosions that still haunted his dreams. Jack's mind drifted to the sandy streets of Fallujah, where he'd left more than just footprints. A group of tourists passed by, their excited chatter catching Jack's attention, oblivious to the subject of their conversation sitting mere feet away. As Jack pondered the strange twist of fate that had brought his past into this moment, he noticed a tour bus pulling up to the curb. Tourists spilled out, their faces bright with anticipation for the day ahead. The driver, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, stepped down last. He scanned the area, his gaze landing on Jack. Recognition flickered in the driver's eyes. He approached Jack, his hand extended. "Excuse me, sir. Are you Jack Sullivan? The Jack Sullivan from the 3rd Infantry Division?" Jack nodded, surprise etched on his weathered face. The driver's face broke into a wide smile. "I'm Derek Thompson. I was in the 101st Airborne. I saw that documentary about your unit. What you did, sir. Your story needs to be heard." As Derek spoke, Jack felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of being seen, truly seen, for who he was and what he had done. It was a feeling both exhilarating and terrifying, like standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure whether to step back or take a leap of faith into the unknown. Derek's words hung in the air between them. An invitation and a challenge rolled into one. Jack shifted uncomfortably on the bench, his instinct to retreat warring with a newfound curiosity. "I don't know," Jack began, his voice gravelly from disuse. "Well, that was a long time ago. I'm not sure anyone wants to hear about that stuff anymore." Derek's eyes softened with understanding. He sat down next to Jack, his posture relaxed but respectful. "I get it. Believe me. But let me tell you something. Those people on my bus, they're here to learn about this city's history, its heroes. And whether you believe it or not, you're part of that history." Jack's gaze drifted to the tour group, now gathered around a nearby statue, listening intently to their guide. He saw families with children, elderly couples, young adults, a cross-section of America. Could his story really mean something to them? "Look," Derek continued, "I'm not asking you to give a speech or anything. Just come along for the ride. Share what you're comfortable with. These folks would be honored to meet a real hero." Jack flinched at the word, hero. "I'm no hero," he muttered. "Just did what I had to do." Derek nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. "That's exactly what makes you one. Come on, give it a shot. If you're uncomfortable, I'll bring you right back here. No questions asked." Something in Derek's earnest expression and the unexpected kindness of a fellow veteran broke through Jack's defenses. With a deep breath, he nodded and slowly stood up. As they approached the bus, the tour group's chatter died down. Derek introduced Jack, his voice filled with respect. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest joining us today. This is Sergeant Jack Sullivan, a decorated veteran of the Iraq War." A murmur of excitement rippled through the group. An elderly woman stepped forward, her eyes shining. "It's an honor to meet you, Sergeant. Thank you for your service." As more people echoed the sentiment, Jack felt a warmth spreading through his chest. It had been years since he'd felt this, not just acknowledged, but appreciated. As he stepped onto the bus, he realized he was taking more than just a physical journey. He was stepping back into a world he'd long ago left behind, ready to share his story with those eager to listen. The tour bus wound its way through the bustling streets of New York, the city's energy palpable even through the tinted windows. Jack sat near the front, his posture gradually relaxing as Derek skillfully wove historical facts with personal anecdotes, creating a tapestry of the city's rich past. Their first stop was the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Plaza. As the group disembarked, Jack hung back, memories flooding his mind. The polished black granite, etched with names, reminded him of the memorial in Washington, D.C., where he'd traced the names of fallen comrades with trembling fingers. A young woman named Rachel approached him, her eyes curious but kind. "Sergeant Sullivan, I was wondering if you could tell us about your experience. Only if you're comfortable, of course." Jack hesitated, then nodded slowly. As the group gathered around, he began to speak, his voice low but steady. "Oh, standing here, I'm reminded of something my drill sergeant told us. He said, 'You're not just fighting for your country, you're fighting for the guy next to you, and that's the truth of it.'" He paused, his eyes distant. "I remember this one night in Fallujah. We were pinned down, taking heavy fire. My buddy, Mike, he was hit. I didn't think twice. I just ran out there and dragged him back. It wasn't bravery. It was brotherhood." The group listened in rapt attention, the bustling city fading into the background. An older man, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, spoke up. "My father was in Vietnam. He never talked about it. Thank you for sharing, son. It helps us understand." As Jack continued to share, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Each story, each memory shared, was like setting down a burden he'd carried for far too long. The faces around him showed not pity, but genuine interest and respect. Rachel, her voice soft, asked, "Do you stay in touch with any of your fellow soldiers?" Jack shook his head, a flicker of regret crossing his face. "No, I lost touch after coming home. It was easier to just forget." Derek, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. "Maybe it's time to reconnect, Jack. The VA has programs that can help veterans find their old units." As they prepared to move on to the next stop, Jack found himself looking at the memorial with new eyes. The names etched in stone were no longer just a reminder of loss, but a testament to the bonds forged in the crucible of war. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of desire to reach out, to reconnect with the brothers he'd left behind. The tour continued, but Jack's mind was already racing ahead, considering possibilities he'd long ago dismissed. As they boarded the bus, he caught Derek's eye and nodded, a silent thank you for pushing him out of his comfort zone and into a world of new possibilities. The tour bus pulled up to the edge of Central Park, its expansive greenery a stark contrast to the concrete jungle surrounding it. As the group disembarked, Derek suggested they take a moment to enjoy the park's tranquility and reflect on what they'd seen and heard so far. Jack found himself walking alongside a middle-aged woman named Carol, who had been quietly attentive throughout the tour. As they strolled along a tree-lined path, she turned to him with a gentle smile. "Sergeant Sullivan, listening to you today has made me think about what freedom really means," she said. "Would you mind sharing what it means to you?" Jack was silent for a moment, his eyes scanning the peaceful scene around them. Children played on nearby swings, couples lounged on blankets, and joggers weaved through the paths. It was a scene of everyday life, yet suddenly it seemed profound. "Freedom," Jack began, his voice thoughtful. "It's not just about big things like democracy or rights. It's about moments like this. The luxury of enjoying a sunny day in the park without fear. The ability to pursue your dreams. To love who you want to love. To speak your mind." He paused, watching a young family picnicking nearby. "When I was over there, in the thick of it, these are the things I thought about. The simple things we take for granted here." Carol nodded, her eyes misty. "I never thought about it that way. Thank you for helping me see it differently." As they rejoined the group, Derek suggested everyone share what freedom meant to them. One by one, people opened up, their perspectives as diverse as their backgrounds. A young student spoke about the freedom to pursue education. An immigrant shared his gratitude for the opportunities America had given him. An elderly veteran, his voice quavering with emotion, talked about the freedom to live in peace. As Jack listened, he felt a growing connection to these strangers. Their words, their experiences, resonated with him in unexpected ways. He realized that while his journey had been unique, the values he'd fought for were shared by all. When it was his turn to speak again, Jack surprised himself with his openness. You know, for a long time after I came back, I felt lost. Like I didn't fit in anymore. But being here with all of you, hearing your stories, it reminds me why we do what we do, why it matters. As they prepared to move on, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. The park, with its blend of nature and humanity, seemed to mirror his own journey, finding peace and belonging amidst the chaos of life. For the first time in years, he felt truly present, not just existing, but participating in the world around him. The group moved on, their conversations now deeper, more meaningful. Jack found himself engaged, asking questions, genuinely interested in the lives and perspectives of those around him. It was as if the walls he'd built around himself were slowly crumbling, allowing him to connect with others in a way he'd forgotten was possible. As the tour progressed, Jack found himself opening up more, sharing stories he hadn't told in years. The group hung on his every word, their faces a mix of awe, empathy, and deep respect. During a stop at the 9/11 memorial, Jack recounted a particularly harrowing experience from his time in Fallujah. There was this day, he began, his voice low but steady, when we were caught in an ambush. My best friend, Dave, he saved my life that day, threw himself on a grenade without a second thought. A hush fell over the group. A young man named Tyler, who had been quietly attentive throughout the tour, stepped forward. Sir, I'm a film student at NYU. Your stories, they're incredible. Have you ever thought about documenting them? I'd be honored to help if you're interested. Jack blinked, surprised by the offer. He glanced at Derek, who gave an encouraging nod. I don't know, Jack said hesitantly. I'm not sure my stories are that special. An older woman named Margaret spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. Oh, but they are, dear. They're a part of our history, a part that needs to be remembered and honored. As the group murmured in agreement, Jack felt a warmth spreading through his chest. For so long, he'd kept these stories bottled up, thinking no one would want to hear them. But here were these strangers, not just listening, but valuing his experiences. Derek, sensing Jack's hesitation, stepped in. You know, Jack, sharing your story could help other veterans. Show them they're not alone in what they've been through. Jack nodded slowly, considering the idea. Maybe you're right. I'll think about it, Tyler. Thank you for the offer. As they moved on to their next stop, Jack found himself deep in thought. The idea of sharing his experiences more widely was both terrifying and oddly appealing. Could his stories really make a difference to others? Throughout the rest of the tour, Jack noticed a change in how the group interacted with him. They asked more questions, shared their own family stories of service, and expressed genuine interest in understanding the veteran experience. A woman named Sarah approached him during a quiet moment. My grandfather was a World War II vet, she said softly. He never talked about his experiences. Listening to you today, I feel like I understand him a little better now. Thank you for that. As the day wore on, Jack realized that this unexpected journey wasn't just about him sharing his past. It was about building bridges, creating understanding, and perhaps most importantly, finding a new purpose for the experiences he'd carried alone for so long. The city passed by outside the bus windows, but Jack barely noticed. His mind was filled with new possibilities, new connections, and a growing sense that perhaps his story wasn't over yet. It was just taking an unexpected new chapter. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city, the tour group filed into a cozy restaurant for a late lunch. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the solitary bench where Jack had started his day. As they settled into their seats, Derek cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. Folks, before we dig in, I think we owe a special thanks to our guest of honor today. Jack, would you mind saying a few words? Jack felt a moment of panic, but as he looked around at the expectant faces, he saw only warmth and encouragement. Taking a deep breath, he stood up, his hands gripping the edge of the table for support. I'm not much for speeches, he began hesitantly. But I want to thank all of you for today. When I woke up this morning, I never imagined I'd be here, sharing my stories with such kind and interested folks. He paused, gathering his thoughts. You know, for a long time after I came home, I felt disconnected. Like I didn't quite fit in anymore. But being here with all of you, hearing your stories, seeing how much you care about understanding what veterans go through, it means more than I can say. Jack's voice grew stronger as he continued. I've learned something important today. Our experiences, whether in war or in everyday life, they connect us. They make us who we are. And sharing them, well, it helps us understand each other better. He looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. So thank you. Thank you for listening, for caring, and for reminding me that even old soldiers like me still have something to offer. As Jack sat down, the restaurant erupted in applause. People reached out to pat his shoulder, shake his hand, or simply nod in acknowledgement. The atmosphere shifted, becoming even warmer and more intimate. Throughout the meal, conversation flowed freely. People shared personal stories, laughed together, and formed unexpected bonds. Jack found himself in the middle of it all, no longer an outsider, but an integral part of this impromptu community. Sarah, the woman whose grandfather had been a World War II veteran, raised her glass in a toast. To Jack, she said, her voice carrying across the table, and to all those who serve, may we never forget their sacrifices, and may we always strive to understand their experiences. As glasses clinked and voices echoed the sentiment, Jack felt a lump form in his throat. For the first time in years, as Jack looked around at these people who had started the day as strangers, but now felt like friends, he realized that this unexpected journey had given him something he'd been missing for far too long, a sense of belonging. As the tour neared its end, the bus filled with a bittersweet energy. The group, once a collection of strangers, now felt like a close-knit community. Derek, sensing the mood, stood up at the front of the bus with a small stack of note cards and pens. Folks, he announced, and we've shared an incredible day together, thanks in large part to Jack's willingness to open up to us. I thought it might be nice if we each took a moment to write a short message of thanks to Jack. Something to remember this day by. The idea was met with enthusiastic nods and smiles. As Derek passed out the cards, a hushed concentration fell over the bus. Jack watched, overwhelmed, as people bent over their cards, writing with thoughtful expressions. After a few minutes, Derek collected the cards and handed them to Jack. With trembling hands, Jack began to read through them. Dear Jack, one card read, your courage in sharing your experiences has opened my eyes to the true meaning of sacrifice. Thank you for your service and for helping me understand. Another message touched him deeply. Jack, my son is considering joining the military. Your stories have given me a new perspective on what that might mean. Thank you for your honesty and bravery, both then and now. As Jack read through the cards, he felt tears welling up in his eyes. Each message was a testament to the connections he'd made, the impact he'd had without even realizing it. The words blurred as he tried to blink away the tears. Sarah's card particularly struck him. Jack, you've helped me understand my grandfather in a way I never could before. Your stories have bridged a gap in my family history. I can't thank you enough. Tyler, the young filmmaker, had written, your story deserves to be told. If you're willing, I'd be honored to help make that happen. You've inspired me more than you know. As Jack finished reading, he looked up to find the entire group watching him with warm smiles and misty eyes. The atmosphere in the bus was charged with emotion. I don't know what to say, Jack stammered, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you all. This means more to me than you can possibly imagine. Derek squeezed Jack's shoulder supportively. No, Jack. Thank you for opening up to us. You've given everyone here a gift today. As the bus made its final approach back to where the tour had started, Jack felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. He had started the day feeling invisible and disconnected. Now, surrounded by newfound friends and heartfelt messages, He felt seen, appreciated, and most importantly, he felt like he belonged. The experience had rekindled something in Jack that he thought he had lost: a sense of purpose, a connection to others, and a renewed pride in his service. As he clutched the stack of cards to his chest, Jack realized that this unexpected journey had not just changed his day, it had changed his perspective on life. As the tour bus pulled up to its final stop, the energy among the group was palpable. No one seemed eager for the day to end. As they filed off the bus, Tyler, the young filmmaker, approached Jack with an idea. "Sergeant Sullivan," he said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm, "I was thinking, would it be okay if we took a group photo to commemorate this amazing day?" Jack, still overwhelmed by the outpouring of gratitude he had received, nodded with a smile. "That sounds like a great idea." Tyler, Derek, overhearing the conversation, chimed in. "Let's do it in front of the bus. It's been our chariot for this journey, after all." As the group assembled, there was a flurry of activity. People jostled good-naturedly for position, calling out to make sure everyone was included. Jack found himself ushered to the center of the group, surrounded by the faces of people who, just hours ago, had been strangers. "All right, everyone," Tyler called out as he set up his camera on a tripod. "Let's make this special. On the count of 3, let's all raise our hands in support of Jack and all our veterans." The suggestion was met with enthusiastic agreement. Jack felt a lump form in his throat, touched by the gesture. "Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. As Tyler pressed the shutter, the group erupted in cheers, hands raised high. Jack, caught up in the moment, found himself raising his own hand, a broad smile spreading across his face. It was a smile that reached his eyes, something that hadn't happened in years. After taking a few shots, Tyler reviewed the photos on his camera. "These are great," he exclaimed. "I'll make sure everyone gets a copy." As the group crowded around to see the photos, there was laughter and excited chatter. Jack stood back, taking in the scene. He watched as people exchanged contact information, made plans to meet up again, and continued to share stories. Sarah approached him, her eyes twinkling. "You know, Jack, I think we might have started something here. This doesn't feel like the end of a tour. It feels like the beginning of something special." Jack nodded, a warmth spreading through his chest. "I think you might be right, Sarah. I never expected anything like this when I woke up this morning." As the group began to disperse, there were hugs, handshakes, and promises to stay in touch. Jack found himself the recipient of numerous heartfelt goodbyes and thank yous. Derek was the last to approach Jack. He handed him a business card with his contact information. "Jack," he said, his voice serious, "I meant what I said earlier. If you ever want to join another tour, or just grab a coffee and chat, please don't hesitate to call." Jack took the card, feeling its weight in his hand. It represented more than just a phone number. It was an invitation to continue this journey of reconnection. As Jack watched the tour group slowly disperse, heading back to their lives, he felt a profound sense of change. The day had started with him feeling isolated and forgotten. It was ending with him surrounded by new friends, feeling valued and understood. The photo session had captured more than just a group of people at the end of a tour. It had captured a moment of transformation, a moment where barriers had been broken down and connections had been forged. For Jack, it represented a new chapter in his life, one filled with hope, purpose, and the warmth of human connection. As the last of the tour group departed, Jack found himself standing alone with Derek, the weight of the day's experiences settling over him like a warm blanket. The bustling city continued its relentless pace around them, but Jack felt as if he were in a bubble of calm reflection. Derek turned to Jack, a knowing smile on his face. "So, how are you feeling, Jack? Bit different from this morning, I'd wager." Jack chuckled softly, shaking his head in amazement. "You could say that again." I don't think I've felt this alive in years, Derek. Thank you for taking a chance on me." Derek clapped him on the shoulder. "No thanks needed. You did all the hard work today. You opened up, shared your story, and look what happened. You touched lives. Jack, that's something special." As they stood there, Jack's mind wandered to the future. For the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of excitement about what lay ahead. "You know," he said slowly, "I've been thinking about what Tyler said, about documenting my experiences." Derek nodded encouragingly. "I think that's a great idea. Your stories deserve to be heard, Jack. They could help a lot of people, both veterans and civilians." Jack took a deep breath, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. "I think I might give it a shot. And I think I might take you up on that offer to join another tour sometime. If the offer still stands, that is." Derek's face lit up. "The offer absolutely stands. In fact, I've got a special Veterans tour coming up next month. How about we start there?" As they exchanged contact information and made tentative plans, Jack felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. He was no longer just a veteran with a past, he was a storyteller with a future. As they prepared to part ways, Derek gave Jack a warm handshake. "Remember, Jack, your story didn't end when you came home. It's still being written. And after today, I'd say it's got some pretty exciting chapters ahead." Jack nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Thanks, Derek, for everything." As Jack began his walk home, his steps felt lighter than they had in years. The city around him, which had seemed so indifferent this morning, now felt full of possibility. He found himself noticing details he'd overlooked before: the laughter of children in a nearby park, the determined faces of people rushing to their destinations, the vibrant energy of a city always in motion. He reached into his pocket, feeling the stack of heartfelt messages from the tour group. Each card represented a connection made, a story shared, a moment of understanding. Jack realized that he was no longer just an observer in this bustling world. He was a part of it again. As he turned the corner towards his apartment, Jack made a decision. Tomorrow, he would call the VA and inquire about veteran support groups. He would reach out to Tyler about the documentary idea, and he would start writing down his experiences, not just the war stories, but the journey of coming home and finding his place again. The sun was setting as Jack reached his building, casting a warm glow over the city. As he looked up at the sky, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. For the first time in a long time, Jack Sullivan was looking forward to tomorrow. Several weeks had passed since that transformative day on the tour bus. Jack sat in a small cafe, nervously adjusting his collar as he waited. The bell above the door chimed, and he looked up to see Sarah entering, a warm smile on her face. "Jack, it's so good to see you," she said, embracing him before taking a seat. "Thanks for coming, Sarah," Jack replied, his voice filled with genuine warmth. "I hope you don't mind, but I invited a few others to join us." As if on cue, the door opened again, and Tyler walked in, followed by Derek and a few other familiar faces from the tour. Soon, the table was surrounded by the group, all chatting excitedly. "I can't believe how much has changed since that day," Tyler said, his eyes bright with excitement. "Jack, the footage we've shot for the documentary is incredible. Your stories, combined with the perspectives of the people you've touched. It's powerful stuff." Jack nodded, a mix of pride and humility on his face. "It's all thanks to you guys. You gave me the courage to share my story." Sarah leaned in, her voice soft but eager. "Jack, remember how I mentioned my grandfather? Well, I've been doing some research, and I found out something amazing. It turns out he served in the same region you did, just decades earlier. I brought some of his old letters. I thought, maybe you'd like to read them." Jack's eyes widened in surprise. "Sarah, I'd be honored," he said, his voice thick with emotion. As Sarah handed over a bundle of worn envelopes, the group fell into a respectful silence. Jack carefully opened the first letter, his hands trembling slightly. As he began to read aloud, the cafe seemed to fade away, replaced by vivid images of a younger man's experiences in a far-off land. The letters spoke of bravery, of fear, of brotherhood, and of hope. They echoed Jack's own experiences in ways that were both haunting and comforting. As he read the final lines of the last letter, Jack looked up to find not just Sarah, but the entire group, wiping away tears. "It's amazing," Derek said softly. "How much has changed, and yet how much remains the same. The experiences of soldiers, the impact on families, it transcends time." The conversation that followed was deep and meaningful. They discussed the nature of service, the challenges of coming home, and the importance of sharing these stories across generations. Jack found himself opening up even more, sharing insights he hadn't even realized he had. As the evening wore on, Jack looked around the table at these people who had become such an important part of his life in such a short time. He saw in their eyes not just understanding, but a shared commitment to keeping these stories alive. "You know," Jack said, his voice filled with emotion, "when I woke up that morning and sat on that park bench, I felt invisible, forgotten. I never could have imagined ending up here, surrounded by friends, with a renewed sense of purpose." Tyler raised his coffee cup in a toast. To new beginnings, old stories, and the power of human connection. As the group echoed the toast, Jack felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. He had come full circle, from feeling lost and alone to being at the center of a community that valued his experiences and his voice. The cafe bustled around them, life in the city continuing its endless rhythm. But at this table, in this moment, a small group of once strangers had created a space of understanding, healing, and hope. Jack Sullivan, once a silent observer, had become a storyteller, a bridge between generations, and a living testament to the enduring impact of service and the power of shared experiences. As they prepared to leave, making plans for future gatherings and project updates, Jack knew that his journey was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. With each story shared, each connection made, he was not just honoring his past, he was building a future filled with purpose, understanding, and the unbreakable bonds of friendship.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.